Okay, surface water distribution. Surface water around the world is unequally distributed among our continental land masses. There are places in the world where the demand for fresh water definitely exceeds the amount that is available. Most of those places are in North and East in Africa, above like the Sahara and the Sahel of Africa, and in the Middle East, the southwestern United States, and in northwest Mexico. So the volumes of water are there, and the percent of total water supply. There are places like in Africa that have a lot of water, but those are to the south. And South America does have desert areas, but they have like half of the water. Australia, not a lot of water. Remember the fires that happened not too long ago? So around the world, the image at the top shows where water is abundant. So we are in an area where we have abundant water. There are definitely stressful times just because we're up here on top of the mountain and sometimes it doesn't always rain. And then we have the population booms in the summertime, the tourism, and we have students at ASU. So there I go, right there. So there are, we do have plenty of water here in the mountains. The orange areas, though, show where there's stress. Orange shows where there's stress. So all across the Middle East, India, China, down into Indonesia as well. The map at the bottom, similar, but maybe more on a micro scale, shows where there's water stress. Really pinpoints in the western part of the United States, all the different areas where there's water stress. So what does it mean to have enough water? That would be where there's a balance of evaporation and precipitation. If there's too much evaporation and not enough precipitation, that's where you have problems. So those desert, warm, hot environments, and then an overload in the population. If the precipitation is high and evaporation is low, like say here, or most of the eastern United States, then water fills up the basins, it infiltrates and becomes groundwater, and you have a healthy water supply. So here is precipitation in the United States. And look at this hotspot of precipitation that we have in North Carolina. This area in blue is kind of like a little mini rainforest in North Carolina. This is just like south of Asheville, that area. But the Mississippi River runs down right through the middle of the country. And it separates the east from the west. So we say in the eastern part of the United States, we have high flow in our rivers, we have lush forest. West of the Mississippi, though, see how the color changes pretty dramatically, and there's much less water, much less precipitation. There are some hot spots where it's green in here, hot spots of precipitation because of the orographic effect, or the mountains, where the precipitation drops out of the atmosphere as it goes over the weather patterns, move over the mountains. I have a dog barking to get in. Hang on one second. Okay, and the Pacific Northwest also. Look at those areas near Seattle that have lots of precipitation, more than 180 inches per year. So that's the rainiest part of the United States. Well, not including probably Hawaii. So just to summarize, for the United States, evaporation exceeds precipitation. West of the Mississippi, it's arid to semi-arid. The small streams, we say they're ephemeral. Pretty much they flow when it rains. In the east, though, we have perennial streams where precipitation is greater than evaporation, and we have water stored in our groundwater, so it keeps the rivers flowing. There's that base flow. All right. When we talk about surface water and even groundwater, we like to put that water into catchment basins or drainage basins or watersheds. These are areas on the land, so it's an area where all the water that falls into through precipitation into that area drains into a river and out one point. So there's a really good, cute video here. What is a watershed? I'm not going to click on it, but you should, back in the static lecture, and watch it. It's about, if you don't know what a watershed is, or just want a refresher, good visual cartoon on what is a watershed. So the boundaries of the watersheds are called divides. And the divides are high spots or ridges in the landscape. So in a flat, relatively flat area, it's going to be really subtle. But in this area, like around Boone, we have ridge lines, mountains that are our drainage divides. So they separate. I'm going to just, can I move myself here? Sorry. That's okay. I'll just go here. The divides separate water flow. So if water falls on a ridgeline, some of it would flow this way, some of it would flow that way, and that divide separates the drainage basins. So we also call these continental divides. They're the big ones. In North Carolina, we have these drainage basins. So we are in Boone. We have not only the Watauga River, but the New River, and then just outside of Boone, the Yadkin PD watershed and the Catawba watershed. So Boone kind of is a confluence of all those watersheds kind of up here at the top of the mountain. So I'm just wondering, what watershed do you live in? Where are you now? Are you out in the Roanoke watershed, maybe the Grenville? So take a look at the map and see if you can figure. If you're in Winston-Salem, you're in the Yadkin PD, and it's interesting that it goes all the way up to Boone. If you're in Greensboro, that water drains down to the Cape Fear River. In Charlotte, to the Catawba River. Asheville is part of the French Broad watershed. So those are the big cities in the area. So take a look at that and see if you're from North Carolina, which watershed. If you're outside of North Carolina, if you're not in North Carolina, maybe you can find yourself on this map. This is the United States showing the continental divides. So over here on the East Coast, we have the Eastern Continental Divide that separates water flowing from the Atlantic to water flowing to the Gulf. Like the New River originates here in Boone, flows to the north through West Virginia, and then down through the Gulf of Mexico. So the Eastern Continental Divide kind of cuts right through Watauga County. To the north, we have the Northern Divide that separates water from basically United States and Canada. There's this area here in the middle that flows out the St. Lawrence Seaway. The Continental Divide here in the west, the big red one here, the Great Divide, separates water pretty much from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And then the Great Basin here, remember there are areas in the west where water flows in but it doesn't flow out. So this would be like the Salton Sea or the Great Salt Lake, where it just gets saltier as water evaporates. So those are the divides of the United States.